And now, broadcasting from deep behind enemy lines in the occupied territory of the Socialist Republic of California, your host, former California State Assemblyman and Governor candidate, Tim Donnelly.
Hey, welcome to another edition of Radio Free California Network, where we fight for your freedom, including the freedom of speech. And it appears that there is a silencing of Americans, and certainly a silencing of dissent in the name of political correctness. It just goes on and on and on. If you happen to go on social media over the weekend, there was a huge story about a woman that scaled the flagpole. I believe it was in South Carolina. And her name is Bree something or other. She's an actress, and took down the Confederate flag, the Confederate battle flag of North Virginia. And it's funny because that's how the left works. They don't wait and go through the proper procedure, which is probably why they win, because they cheat all the time. And then conservatives point and go, "Oh, they cheated. Well, I'm sure somebody will come along and fix everything." Instead, they have no respect for the process. They only have respect for what they want. And what they want is they want to force their views on everyone. I want you to understand that. We're gonna start the week with a simple understanding that it doesn't matter what the issue is. Whether it's gay marriage, they don't want equality for all. They want their way or the highway. They want to, and we've got a poll up right now at timdonnellyshow.com asking your opinion of whether or not you think that the left will use the Supreme Court's creation of a new constitutional right for same-sex couples to marry to essentially persecute churches and schools and individuals who oppose the decision. And I'll throw it out there. 323-746-TALK is our number if you want to call in with your thoughts. Do you think this is just equality, equal rights? My opinion is that a huge majority of Americans agree with me. Of course they do. I'm Tim Donnelly. I'm making the Noskinator laugh a little too hard. She almost spilled her water. No, but that they don't want government more involved in their lives. I believe we should get government out of marriage. I've always believed that. And I've pushed for that, and I've talked about that. And I think young and old, Republican, Democrat, and religious or not, many Americans understand that the threat is by opening up the door of your bedroom to the government, by opening up the door of your church to the government, by opening up the door of your school. So then we get into a whole other bunch of issues I'm not going to dwell on here, about whether or not religious institutions should have tax-exempt status, or whether we should just do away with all tax-exempt status for all organizations altogether, across the board, religious or otherwise, have no nonprofits, no nothing. Just every time you give a donation, you are subject to essentially declaring that contribution. And it's not tax-deductible to the giver, and it is not tax-free to the institution, which, of course, would certainly put a screeching halt to a lot of the giving that's going on. But what I'm talking about is this business of silencing dissent. Anything you don't agree with, anyone you don't like, you just shut them up. How do you do it? Well, I'll read you some tweets later on, but I can tell you, if you go on Twitter and go to #LoveWins, you'll certainly find the greatest collection of hate mail towards Christians in particular. If you're out there looking for the Antichrist you need to get over looking at Obama and start looking on Twitter. And you will find people that say the most offensive, hateful, intolerant things. I mean, vicious, vile, ugly things. And they're almost always leftists. Always. It's astonishing. But so if they can't get the ban on the Confederate flag done fast enough, they just scale the flagpole while, oh, by the way, videotaping themselves so they get plenty of publicity, and then rip it down. We've got Louis Farrakhan, who wants to get rid of the American flag. Listen to this.
White folks march with you because they don't want you upsetting the city. They don't give a damn about them 9. When they arrested that skunk, you know, a skunk is a heck of an animal, you know. Even after it's dead, its funk keeps on going. When they arrested him, they took him to the Burger King. I'll be damned. Man, just killed 9 human beings. And you know what they were saying? You did a good job. Kill all them. You think they were sympathetic? If they were sympathetic with us, they'd have snatched him, put him in chains, had the gun on him. I don't know what the hell the fight is about over the Confederate flag. We need to put the American flag down because we've cut as much hell under that as the Confederate flag.
For anyone out there who thinks the left is going to just come around and just get along, live and let live, you really need to be listening a lot harder. Because what Farrakhan just said, it was a little hard to hear the recording, but what he said was those cops took that murderer, Dylan Roof, to Burger King and told him, good job. Well, first of all, there's no evidence that ever happened. I don't believe it happened. I think Farrakhan is being hyperbolic and trying to incite hatred of white people and cops, basically, because that's how he makes his living. But he gets away with it. There's no media out there saying, Farrakhan, that's going a little bit too far, because everyone I know was outraged and angered and heartbroken over the death of 9 innocent people, especially the fact that they were just brutally cut down and slaughtered in a church, in a place that we think of as sanctuary, where we go for solace, we go to pray, we go to worship, we go to seek God. You'd think you'd be safe in a church of all places. I guarantee you there may be a tiny handful of people in this country that sympathize with Dylan Roof. But when you listen to Louis Farrakhan, he makes it sound like it's it's everyone. And he even mentions later on the bridge there in Selma. I forget the name of it, but he mentions the bridge in Selma. Well, you know what? Yeah, the first time it was almost all black people that walked across that bridge, and the cops felt free to beat and murder people on that bridge because they dared cross it. And then, because that happened, there was an army that showed up, including an awful lot of white people who stood there in unison, willing to take the same punishment, but because their numbers were so large, that it began a movement, and it began something more powerful than the initial beatdown and brutality that the first group suffered. And none of the change of civil rights would have happened if it weren't for Americans of every color coming together and saying, hey, this is a fundamental human right to be treated as a human being, period. End of story. And that happened from building a movement that had moral authority. And yeah, a lot of people paid with their lives. Martin Luther King paid with his life. Other people all across the southern states were brutalized, beaten, and murdered because they dared stand up to be treated as a human being. And for him to say that, I don't know. I mean, if we can't have the American flag together under, well, I guess, what are our choices? The gay flag? All the different colors?
Well, I've seen a couple pictures of, like, the gay flag mixed with the American flag. So it's a rainbow American flag.
What does that mean?
I don't know. To me, it's like they're trying to make the mood flag. Like, depending on what's going on in the U.S., that's what flag they want to make it.
So it's the flag of feeling.
Right.
Well, I mean, the American flag actually has significant meaning. Every part of it is symbolic of the sacrifice of Americans to defend our freedom, but also the 50 states with the 50 stars. And by the way, Obama, it's not 57. And I mean, I think we're at a point where some people maybe just want us to wave the white flag and cease to be a country. Would you just want us to surrender?
Yeah, because that's the only flag apparently that won't offend anybody.
Yeah, I'm just going to read you something real quick, and then we're going to go to break. This photograph was sent to me by someone that shall remain unnamed. Ladies and gentlemen, the new flag of the United States, it's non-offensive and shows that we give into anything. And it's made of polyester, so no one is offended by cotton, but a natural organic poly so as to not harm the environment. And it's biodegradable, like our morals. What do you think? 323-746-TALK. You're listening to The Tim Donnelly Show. We'll be right back after these messages. Whether you're an experienced shooter or just buying your first gun, Turner's Outdoorsman has everything you need, along with a knowledgeable and friendly staff to help you find that perfect gear for your next adventure. Turner's now has 18 locations across Southern California, including a Victorville location right on Bear Valley Road. Be sure to check out the new Archery Pro shops in the Victorville, Chino Hills, and Pasadena locations. If you're not sure what you're looking for, you can browse and shop their selection at turners.com. Be sure to check out their weekly specials and sign up to get them delivered directly to your inbox. Turner's is where I turn for all my firearms and ammo needs. Remember to tell them Tim Donnelly sent you, and you'll get an additional discount. Hey, welcome back to the Tim Donnelly Show. I am your host, former California State Assemblyman and Governor candidate Tim Donnelly, and we're talking about the silencing of America, the silencing of dissent, in order to kneel at the altar of political correctness. And, if you think it is going to be limited to simply silencing those who dissent with the Supreme Court's decision on gay marriage, think again. Because pretty soon, I believe the left, and you already heard the president refer to it. President Obama said, Obamacare is no longer just a law. It is a fundamental human right. And you have government. See, since the founding of this country, We have always recognized that our rights are derived not from government, but from God, from the Creator. It may offend you if you're an atheist, but it is written right into our founding documents. The recognition of a creator, of a higher being. Now, to their credit, the founders didn't force a view on who that creator was. They simply acknowledged that the right to rule yourself, or to have a government that rules at your consent, what is called self-rule, is a right that's so powerful, that's so important, that's so natural, that so predates and precedes even the creation of government, that it could only come from God. And they further go on to talk about how it is the purpose of governments to secure those rights, those inalienable ones, that of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, I wrote an op-ed, and it was fascinating because I got all kinds of hate from all sides, because I noted, and I believe, that this decision by the Supreme Court, both on Obamacare and gay marriage, but on gay marriage in particular, will be used to deprive us of fundamental liberty. So, to have a fundamental liberty denied, and that fundamental liberty is one that was a big part of the founding of this country. It was religious freedom. And it was the right to be able to practice your faith without the government prohibiting the free exercise thereof or creating its own religion, the Establishment Clause. But these are both in the First Amendment, right along with freedom of speech. And it should be noted that what is at risk and what we're facing, the threat, is not that people of the same sex can get married. That's really not a threat to anybody. If you think it is, you're welcome to call in an opine. I don't have an issue with everyone having the same legal and civil protections under the law. I believe that is the way our country was designed. We're not all going to agree with each other. But when the government and when certain individuals, activists, come after my freedom, they're going to get a fight. We'll be right back after this break. If you've been listening long to the Tim Donnelly Show, you know that we talk constantly about defending freedom and about defending our natural inalienable rights. The Firearms Policy Coalition is a partner of the Tim Donnelly Show. But more than that, they're on the front lines every day in Sacramento and all across the state, in the courts, defending your Second Amendment right. That is a natural right that the government merely acknowledged in the Second Amendment. If you value your freedom, then you need to join Firearms Policy Coalition. Become a member. I'm a member, and I'm happy to support an organization that is doing such an incredible job. Go to joinfpc.org. The Tim Donnelly Show sent you. Or go to timdonnellyshow.com and click on the FPC link to make it easy. But whatever you do, join today. FPC.org. Hey, welcome back to the Radio Free California Network. We stream live at timdonnellyshow.com. We also are putting up a new feature at Tim Donnelly Show which is a polls page. We're going to start polling you just to see what you think. I'm curious what you think about the real implications of this latest extremely controversial decision by the Supreme Court to grant a constitutional right, create a new constitutional right for people of the same sex to marry. And what is really at issue here is, A, whether or not the federal government and the federal government, which is the one that will enforce this, whether or not it has any right and any standing. And there's people on both sides debating it. But my question, and that issue, by the way, is called federalism, which is that the vast majority of the powers that are not enumerated directly in the Constitution are given to the states. It's a concept that some call states' rights, but I'd rather call it federalism and refer to the 10th Amendment. But and we're going to see this play out. How are they going to enforce this? And states like Alabama have already said, well, we're not going to issue any marriage licenses. And I'm saying, woo-hoo, it's about time. Let's get the government out of marriage. I mean, unless you're concerned that you might marry your cousin, which you could figure out by Googling her on the internet or him, why do we even have the government involved in marriage? They just use the institution of marriage, which, by the way, is a creation of the church. It is a sacred covenant between one man and one woman in the church. That is what marriage was. And unfortunately, there were those who felt the need to get government to sanction marriage, to bless marriage, to control this sacred covenant of the church. And so, and of course, the government figured out how to tax it and how to levy fees and how to do all these different things. But now, what is going to be the implication of this decision? Do you think it will be used by the left, by the government, to persecute Christians, to persecute people of faith, of any faith, really, that do not believe in same-sex marriage, even if they might believe in civil unions and the civil rights that go along with that and equal treatment under the law? And I'm curious. So we've put up a poll and asked, do you believe that this will be used to persecute those in churches, in schools, and individuals who do not agree with the decision? Will they have their tax-exempt status taken away as a church? Will they have their tax-exempt status taken away, or federal funding or whatever is tied to them as a religious school? Will they have... And that gets into the whole issue of how much power do you want to give to the federal government? How much power do you want to surrender to a centralized government? And for me, I don't want to give them any more than the Constitution gave them, because the Constitution was designed to restrain their power. And it's a strange time that we're living in to see a free people. And I was a little shocked by a lot of my libertarian friends who are celebrating the creation of a new right granted by government, not God, but by government, that I believe is going to create more bureaucracy. It's going to grow the government. And when you grow government, you have to, by necessity, limit freedom. When government expands, liberty contracts. In order to give and create a new right, you got to take some rights from somebody else. And in order for, and we saw an inkling of this with the We saw an inkling of this with I'm just going to go to CNN. We're seeing it all over the place, but there's a good example on CNN with Jeffrey Toobin, who literally says it's not legal for Justice Scalia to even talk as he sees fit about gays.
I think if you want illustrations of how much the country has changed in the past decade or so, you need only look at Justice Scalia, because in 2003, in the case of Lawrence v. Texas, he also dissented, another Anthony Kennedy opinion, and that was the case that said gay people could not be criminally prosecuted for having sex. And listen to this, what Justice Scalia wrote in 2003. He said, "Many Americans do not want persons who openly engage in homosexual conduct as partners in their business, as scoutmasters for their children, as teachers in their children's schools, or as boarders in their home. They view this as protecting themselves and their families from a lifestyle that what they believe to be immoral and destructive." I mean, really just outward bigotry against gay people. Now, today, Justice Scalia begins his dissenting opinion by saying, "This issue is of no particular importance to me, and the only real issue here is the democratic process. Who makes the decision? Should it be the courts or should it be the people?" Even Justice Scalia, who is the biggest social conservative on the court, he cannot talk the way he used to talk about gay people because culturally, politically, even legally, it's simply not appropriate and even legal in ways to talk about gay people the way Justice Scalia used to talk about gay people.
See,
well, he has become the
that right there. Let me just break it down for you what that is. When you heard Jeffrey Toobin saying he cannot talk about people, whether they're gay or whatever, he cannot talk about them that way. It's not legal. It's not appropriate. And it's not legal. I think he mentioned legal twice. What does that really mean? What's his point? His point is the thought police. Yeah, 1984. Remember George Orwell's book predicting that one day the government would control not only what you do, not only the freedoms you can enjoy and where you can go and how you can get there, what kind of car and what type of fuel and how many miles per gallon and what type of gun you can own or not own, what type of bullets, whether you can take your groceries home in paper or plastic, whether or not, I mean, there's even in one state back east, there's a law prohibiting you backing into your driveway. Yes. So, but that's not enough for the left, who loves centralized power, because they use the power to bully people with whom they don't agree. See, the people who truly believe in freedom, I'm going to say it that way rather than say conservatives, because there's some conservatives and there's a lot of Christian conservatives that were fully in favor of getting government to sanction and define marriage. And now government is defining marriage a way they don't like. And yet it would have been much more constitutionally correct, and it would have been much more a liberty-minded position to simply say that government shouldn't be involved in our marriages at all whatsoever. But now that this has happened, I believe that the next step is persecution of anyone who dissents, persecution of any church that refuses to marry those who are of the same sex, even though many people who oppose same-sex marriage have no problem that there are some churches in America that will marry you. That's called freedom. And it's interesting how one set of people acknowledge and respect freedom, and the other side wants to control your very thoughts. For this CNN analyst, Jeffrey Toobin, to say that a Supreme Court justice can no longer speak his mind, can no longer say his opinion, because it might not be legal. And if you don't believe that, right here in the grand old state of California, why is it that I can always come up with examples from California? Because we lead the country in craziness. We passed a bill years ago called SB 48. This happened when in my first term in the assembly. And that bill dictates to all K through 12 schools that the only discussion in history of homosexuals will be in a positive light. That homosexuals will be presented in a positive light in history. Now think about that. Now, they didn't pass a law that said Christians will only be presented in a positive light. So let's look at the implications of that. As much as I love my faith, the church has done a tremendous amount of damage in the name of Christ. As a matter of fact, during the Crusades, it was the Christians who were out there battling and killing people, trying to convert them. That's a dark and ugly chapter in church history. We condemn the Muslims for doing the exact same thing. It's slightly different, but so if we applied SB 48 to Christians, then we wouldn't actually teach history, would we? So government is being cajoled by the left to subvert the truth, subvert an accurate portrayal of history, and present a politically correct version of history. And they have no shame. They don't care whether history ultimately suffers. They want to rewrite it so they look good and everybody else looks bad, because that way they pave the way and brainwash people to accept further government control and interference in their lives. 323-746-TALK if you have an opinion. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Radio Free California Network. I am your host, former California State Assemblyman and governor candidate Tim Donnelly. And we're going to switch gears here a little bit and go to the 2016 election. And one of my favorite people so far, at least in the race in terms of how he's dealing with things, is Donald Trump. You know, it's funny. They asked him, did you hear the question where they asked him what his view on marriage was?
Well, I read the article.
And he said, yeah, I had two good ones. He said, and it wasn't their fault that they broke up. They were good women. I was the problem. First of all, I liked him for that. But then they kept pushing him because see what the left does and what the right has never figured out is the way they position themselves on the marriage issue has splintered and destroyed the Republican Party, at least in terms of elections, and certainly in terms of presidential elections. And they have handed, at a time when people should be pouring into the Republican Party, they're not. And in large part, it's because many of the representatives of the party, and when I say representatives, I'm talking about candidates running for office, can't seem to articulate one of the most important positions to them, and so they dismiss it out of hand with some kind of a non sequitur that turns into what the left will describe as hate. By the way, you're not allowed to believe in that marriage is between one man and one woman, or you're a hater. You just need to understand that. But when you're running for office, they work really hard to get a soundbite so they can then take whatever you said, and every chance the left gets, they will challenge you with that. So what I liked about Donald Trump is they said, well, what do you have to say about the Supreme Court's decision, and what do you think about same-sex marriage and this and that? And he said, no, I'm for traditional marriage. And they said, well, what do you have to say about this, this recent decision? And he said, I don't. Literally, I don't. Now, you can love the guy or hate the guy, but he is one thing, if nothing else. He's smart and he's strategic. And he did not paint himself into a corner, because we all know he's not a social conservative. And yet he does hold the view of traditional marriage, that's marriage. And so I just found that fascinating. But that's not why he's in the headlines. That's why he's not in the headlines. It's the only reason he's not in the headlines. But he has been punching back against the nonstop assault on him for his views on immigration. And, I've always believed that when you run for office, you ought to put your views out there, and you ought to speak them plainly and let the chips fall where they may. Now, I'm not a billionaire, so nobody came after me. You want me to wrap it up now so you can play some of his clip? Okay, go ahead.
And I love Mexico, but every time I talk about it, they accuse me of being a racist. And I have great respect for the leaders of Mexico. The problem is they're much smarter than our leaders. So you have plants going into Mexico. You have cars being built in Mexico. You have tremendous economic development in Mexico. You have a border which is very unsafe. I was really criticized for the border, but the truth is, it's true. So I went out and we got stories. I said, do me a favor. They think that, like, the way I said it was fine, but they made it sound like I was very tough. Well, then I got out. I had one of my people, do me a favor, just check the border. Is it, safe? I don't know. They come back with stories that are mind-boggling. So here's a story. So Univision's the one they pull out. I'll sue them. I'll sue them big league. I do fine with lawsuits. But they pull out. And you know what? Maybe NBC will pull out, because, I don't know, maybe NBC doesn't have the courage to stand up and say, we need strong borders. It could be. Maybe NBC will pull out. I don't know. Because the problem with these public companies, they get a little bit of pressure, and they immediately say, oh, gee, we can't be associated with that. That's the problem with our country. So who knows?
Couldn't have said it better. We will continue the discussion right after these messages here on the Tim Donnelly Show.
Don't you think it's about time you treat yourself or someone you love to something very special? Well, Ozell Jewelers, the finest jewelry store in the high desert, is known throughout the high desert for having the largest variety of fine-looking jewelry and gifts for every special occasion. Ozell custom designs and manufactures their own jewelry, so you'll be able to find exclusive, one-of-a-kind, stunning styles you won't find anywhere else in Southern California. If you're looking for fine jewelry at unbeatable prices, Ozell Jewelers is the place to go. Show appreciation to that special person in your life with something special to cherish forever. Ozell Jewelers, voted best jewelers in the high desert by the Daily Press regularly for years. Ozell Jewelers has been putting smiles on high desert faces for over 30 years. Ozell Jewelers in Rancho Cucamonga, Palm Desert, and Amargosa Road by Red Lobster in Victorville. Ozell Jewelers.
Oh, say can you see, by the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hail, that the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars, through the perilous fight, over the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave, over the land of the free, and the home of the brave.
Hey, welcome back to the Radio Free California Network. I am your host, former California State Assemblyman and Governor candidate Tim Donnelly. Did I tell you what happened over the weekend? I woke up and thought I was having a heart attack.
Yes.
Pretty crazy.
No more rock stars.
Wow.
I'm being serious.
Yeah. Well, I did. I will admit. Well, let me just say what happened, and then we'll get into that. But I had two rock stars on Friday night or Friday, and during the show. One on the way home, and one. And of course, I drink a lot of coffee. And
your heart is on overload.
Yeah, I know. I drink caffeine to calm down, and I guess it catches up to you, especially when it's really hot out and you get dehydrated. And so I woke up and was, had really had a racing heart for what seemed like 2 hours. And I went outside, went for a walk. I drank a lot of water. That's one thing I haven't been doing. And the other thing is that night, it with the fire up in the mountains that they've been putting out, a lot of the smoke was coming into the house, and because it's hot, so you open the window, and even with screens, smoke comes in, and that couldn't have been good combined with me being dehydrated and slightly over-caffeinated. I'm getting this disgusted look.
I wish we were on
the Noskinator
TV. You would see my face.
Yeah, the face is saying it all. But anyway, I just want to thank everyone who, I put a post up on Facebook and a lot of people responded with a lot of advice. I did talk to a doctor, and he basically told me, you are out of shape and you need to get in shape and work your heart, and because it's a muscle. Sometimes you just have to have a wake-up call. So I have, for the first time in a long time, I am struggling to be a rock star on radio without a rock star. So I'm flying clean here with just water and a little bit of coffee. I've cut my caffeine intake by about 50%. I know everybody's out there probably going, they're falling asleep listening to my personal life drama. But at any rate, I want to bring you a little more. Do we have that other clip by our friend Donald Trump? This guy, he's going to be declared his own hate group. I'm just telling you. NBC pulls the plug on the guy. NBC decides that they don't want to be in business with Donald Trump over The Apprentice or the Miss Universe contest, simply because a handful of people called into and wrote in and launched a protest over his views on illegal immigration. And all he's doing, look, could Donald Trump use better language? Could he use some qualifiers and make his viewpoint clearer that he doesn't view every single immigrant who comes here from Mexico as a rapist? Anybody with a brain knows that's what he means. But there's a whole industry that is designed around the whole Hispanic agenda, and being offended is like, as soon as some public figure says something and you can gin people up into a boycott, then there's this incredible perception of power. That's not lost on the politicians. So pretty soon the politicians all clam up and they ignore 80% of the American people who want the damn border secured. That's all he's really talking about.
So, Mr. Trump, a lot of people say, well, you're the new flavor of the week, so of course you would rise in the polls. And they also say, hey, he's just an opportunist. He's really not serious about running for president. It's just name recognition, and that's why he's doing so well. How do you respond?
Well, Gretchen, first of all, in the Suffolk poll, I'm number 2, not number 3, but that's okay. I mean, these are minor details, but
Point
I was
taken.
actually number 2. But I think, look, people know we're not going to get ripped off anymore if I'm running things, because this country is in such trouble. Mexico, you look at what's happening. They're just killing us at the border. They're killing us at trade. No matter where you look, Japan, China, every country we do. Saudi Arabia makes $1 billion a day. We defend them. They give us nothing. It's just like, it just can't go on like this. We owe 19 trillion, very close to 19 trillion. When we get to 24 trillion, it's over. That's like the magic number. We're going to be a floating Greece. We're going to be Greece that's large. And, you know, it's a real problem. So I think that's one of the reasons I resonate with people, because they want to see our country be great again. And no politician is going to make this country great again.
You're 100% still serious about this, because you know that the detractors out there say he's just an opportunist. He's just trying to increase his brand. You say what?
Well, I haven't heard that lately. You know, they said I wasn't going to file. I filed. I ran. I announced. I did everything. So they're not really. Actually, you're the first one that said that in a long time. And now I'm doing very well in the polls because people say, oh, wow, he is really running. And I give up a lot. You know, when I do this, I give up a lot. As an example, Univision. I'm going to have to sue Univision now because I speak negatively about trade with Mexico. Right. And I love Mexico. I love the Mexican people. I love them. They're great people. But Mexico is just taking our negotiators to lunch. Our president doesn't have a clue. They don't know what they're doing, and Mexico's making a fortune, and somebody has to bring it up. So Univision says you got to stop talking badly about Mexico. Right. And again, I love Mexico. I love the people of Mexico.
So the breaking news
and I
right
said,
now,
I'm not going to do that. But
the breaking news now is that Univision is dropping the Miss USA pageant based on some of your comments about Mexico. And of course, you own the Miss USA pageant. And so
I own it. That's right.
But you said,
this is what you said
about Latinos, though.
They have a signed contract.
Okay, I'm going to get to that in a minute. But I want to know whether or not you would stick by these comments that you said about Latinos, saying, quote, they're bringing drugs, crime, they're rapists. Are you going to stick by those comments? Because Univision fired back saying...
No, of course. Just so you understand.
Go ahead.
Greta, that's what's happening. Do you think they're sending their best people over here? And I'm not just talking Mexico. I'm talking about all over the world. They're coming through the southern border. You're going to have them coming in from the Middle East. You have them coming all over. But you just speak to the border guards. Do you think they're sending their best and their finest over here? It's not just Mexico. Everybody's pouring through the border. And I'm angry at Mexico because Mexico allows it to happen.
Okay.
But of course, they're criminals in many cases.
Well, okay. So
why would I change that statement?
All right. So
By the way, all you have to do is speak to the border guards and they'll tell you what's happening.
All right. Here's what Univision has said now.
Of course I'm staying by the statement. Everybody knows it's true.
We see firsthand the work ethic, love for family, strong religious values, and the important role Mexican immigrants and Mexican Americans have had and will continue to have in building the future of our country. We will not be airing the Miss USA pageant on July 12th or working on any other projects tied to the Trump organization. Now, you're breaking news on The Real Story today. You say you're going to sue them because you have a signed contract.
Of course I have a signed contract. 5 years, they have to pay me almost $15 million. I have a signed contract. They can't do this. They called me up today and apologized. They didn't even know what to say. They called up and apologized. They want me to stop telling the facts, whether it's the border facts or the trade facts, which are just as bad. Because in trade, what Mexico, between the car plants that they're taking away from us and all of the trade, and people understand. The reason I'm doing well in the polls is because people understand if I was running things, we will make good deals. We're not going to make Sergeant Bergdahl deals where we get Bergdahl and they get 5 killers that they've wanted for years. We're going to make real deals in this country again. We're losing a fortune. We owe $19 trillion. We can't afford to do this anymore. They're sending plenty of bad, and I'm just saying they're pouring through the border. All you have to do, you don't have to ask Donald Trump. Ask the border guards who's coming in. Believe me, you won't be very happy when you find out. And by the way, that's common sense.
Okay. Well,
Gretchen, it's common sense. When you look at what's going on, it's common sense that who is coming. Look at the crime that's taking place along the border, Gretchen.
Okay.
It's a disaster.
I think what they took offense to was that it sounded as if you were calling all Mexicans rapists and drug dealers and such. And of course, I know you probably didn't intend that.
Of course I wouldn't do that.
Okay. All right. So we're going to have to see how this plays out in the courts because the pageant's coming up July 12th. You may not be on Univision, or you may, but you have said you will sue them now. Okay. Things are getting heat. You know, you're just stirring up a lot of heat, Donald, because now singer-songwriter Neil Neil Young, complaining that you used his song Rockin' in the Free World during your presidential announcement when you came down that escalator. You called him a hypocrite on Twitter after Young asked you to back one of his projects. So what's the real story on Neil Young? What happened?
It's crazy. I hardly know Neil Young. He calls me up. He comes over to my office. He wants me to go in a deal. He wants me to give.
He's suing everybody. But look, here's the thing. If you are a traditional candidate for president, you can't afford to be as blunt and plain spoken as Donald Trump. Now, you might not agree with him. You might have heard his initial comments, and they might have fallen very hard on your ear. But anybody with a brain knows that he was not calling all immigrants, legal or illegal. Certainly, he was referring to illegals who were coming across with the intent of committing crimes. But in shorthand, because he kind of does stream of consciousness without notes, he skipped a few words, the qualifying words that a more polished candidate would use. But here's the thing. This is the part that I find fascinating. And by the way, I am not endorsing Donald Trump here. I want to be clear. I'm not endorsing anybody in this 2016 race. I want to watch it. I'm covering it. But he's the only one that's a threat. They have basically labeled him, Donald Trump, a hate group. There's no chance they're going to label the GOP a hate group. They only label you a hate group if you're being effective on the battlefield, if you're combating them and confronting them with facts, and if you say it in a way that galvanizes the people. They call you a hate group. There aren't very many hate groups in this country, but they consider the Minutemen a hate group. I was proud to be a member of the Minutemen. They consider a whole lot of organizations. They consider Breitbart, the news group that I write for, and we often have their columnists. They're considered a hate group. The Drudge Report is considered a hate group because he publishes headlines that they don't want to read. But the GOP is not considered a hate group because they're so busy. The GOP is a threat to no one except themselves and their own existence if they continue on the path they're on. But who knows? Maybe Donald Trump will ride to their rescue against and over their own protests. 323-746-TALK if you want to weigh in after these commercial messages. Whether you're an experienced shooter or just buying your first gun, Turner's Outdoorsman has everything you need, along with a knowledgeable and friendly staff to help you find that perfect gear for your next adventure. Turner's now has 18 locations across Southern California, including a Victorville location right on Bear Valley Road. Be sure to check out the new Archery Pro shops in the Victorville, Chino Hills, and Pasadena locations. If you're not sure what you're looking for, you can browse and shop their selection at Turners.com. Be sure to check out their weekly specials and sign up to get them delivered directly to your inbox. Turners is where I turn for all my firearms and ammo needs. Remember to tell them Tim Donnelly sent you, and you'll get an additional discount. You're listening to the Radio Free California Network, and we were talking before the break about Donald Trump and his outspokenness, but really as a larger backdrop to this whole business of the left silencing dissent. They claim they love dissent, but they want to silence it. They don't want you to even have your thoughts. If you think that Obamacare is socialism, if you think that Obamacare is stealing from you to give your neighbor who doesn't work for a living better health care, you're not allowed to say it or think it. If you think that marriage between people of the same sex is not ordained by God and is not marriage, then they want to silence you. And they make no bones about it. And this is part of a much larger construct and plan by the left. And when I say plan, the plan is simple. If you can silence your most effective critics, and Donald Trump has certainly become one. So what you do is you look at the leverage points you have. You get a bunch of people ginned up and angry and worked up into a frenzy. They're frothing at the mouth, all because he told the truth about the border in a couple of sentences. And he used a little shorthand, and it came off sounding in a way that hurts your ear. So it was easy for them to gin up a lot of anger. And there's hundreds and thousands of government-sponsored so-called Hispanic activist groups, which have nothing to do with fighting for Hispanics. They just have to do with fighting for the Democrat leftist agenda. They push socialism everywhere they go. Most of them are sponsored by the George Soroses and the government in some capacity, as well as other socialist organizations like the World Workers' Party and other communist groups with communist underpinnings. But here's a guy that, because he's running for president and because of the political views that he holds, is being penalized. Now, I'm not expecting you to go home and cry for a billionaire. No, we're not going to ask you to do that. But he's being penalized because of his beliefs. He's being demonized. He's being literally punished by the left. This is not something that just organically came out of nowhere. And we here at the Tim Donnelly Show peruse the leftist websites and their Twitter feeds, and we have pulled up a collection that the Noskinator is going to read for you. And if you have children in the car, when you see the F word, just don't say it. Oh, no, I won't say the F word. Okay, but you can just say beep. You can say F word. Okay, I'll say F word. All right. So, I mean, these are disturbing. So, okay, where do I start? Let's see. Christians have too many opinions. Just shut the F up and feed the poor. What? Yeah, they want right there. They have no problem just silencing you. No freedom of speech for you. You have too many opinions. Okay, here's another good one. F. I hate Christians who claim that they are oppressed because their previously exclusive advantages are becoming available to all. Okay. Real love is when Jesus died for us 2,000 years ago, not when gay people get married. F off, you ancient dinosaur. Okay. Wow. Here's a good one. I'm sorry, but you're nowhere even close to being considered a good Christian if you're against two people being happily married. F you. How about the cannabis-solace one? Where's that one? At the top or the bottom? No, it's about a third of the way down. Okay, let's see if I can find that one. Oh, wait, but this one's good. Okay. Obama's the first POTUS to be or to do many things. Pissing off far-right fundamentalist Christians is my fave. Go big or F off. He went big. Here I'm going to read this cannabis one. This is from someone named Cannabis Solace on Twitter. Jesus Christ, it's effing 2015, and y'all sexting and watching SpongeBob, but a N-word can't be gay? Grow the F up. Okay, here's another one. F that. My Jesus loves gay people. I'll write my own Bible. Wow. Let's see. Go to the ones where they talk about just go kill yourself. Oh, there's like 15 of those. Let's see. We're almost running out of time here. Well, the left obviously is in favor not only of assisted suicide, they want to assist you in committing suicide if you have the wrong opinions. This one, gay cartoons is where I draw the line. Laugh out loud. Just kill yourself, please.
Okay, if you're against gay marriage, either get over it or kill yourself.
If you're anti-gay, just kill yourself.
If you can't be happy for gay marriage, you're a broken person and should go kill yourself right now.
If gay marriage being legal upsets you, please grow up or kill yourself. Both are fine. That's Tyler Mobis.
Okay, so here's one where they are talking about apparently a Fox News guy. Legalizing gay marriage has happened. Why don't we just legalize marrying your daughter? They are wrong. Effing kill yourself, Fox News guy.
That one made a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, some of these people can't even write proper English.
If you have a problem with gay marriage, kill yourself.
Okay, here's a good one. If you tell me you don't support gay marriage, but you watch lesbian porn, kill yourself. I mean, really?
We delve into the swamp and the sewage, so you don't have to.
I'm going to go brush my teeth.
323-746-TALK if you want to talk about it here on the Tim Donnelly Show. If you've been listening long to the Tim Donnelly Show, you know that we talk constantly about defending freedom and about defending our natural inalienable rights. The Firearms Policy Coalition is a partner of the Tim Donnelly Show. But more than that, they're on the front lines every day in Sacramento and all across the state, in the courts, defending your Second Amendment right, that is a natural right that the government merely acknowledged in the Second Amendment. If you value your freedom, then you need to join Firearms Policy Coalition. Become a member. I'm a member, and I'm happy to support an organization that is doing such an incredible job. Go to joinfpc.org. The Tim Donnelly Show sent you. Or go to timdonnellyshow.com and click on the FPC link to make it easy. But whatever you do, join today. FPC.org. Welcome back to the Tim Donnelly Show, where we've been discussing the persecution of free speech by the left. We've been discussing the silencing of Americans, and it's really extraordinary when you look at what I was sort of perusing what the 2016 candidates said about the whole decision of the Supreme Court to fundamentally redefine marriage and create a brand new constitutional right out of thin air. And one that was interesting was Carly Fiorina. She said, "I have been an advocate of civil unions because of benefits." That is very different than what the Supreme Court telling us what marriage is. Marriage is an institution grounded in spirituality between a man and a woman that can bring forth life. Now, contrast that to what we read you prior to the break, the hatred, vilification from the left. Mike Huckabee has also made some interesting comments that you may or may not agree with, but they're certainly much more sophisticated and nuanced and intelligent than anything you're reading on Twitter from the militant gay activists. The Supreme Court has spoken with a very divided voice on something only the Supreme Being can do. Redefine marriage. That's Huckabee. And we have on the line with us Brad Dacus, who is the president of the Pacific Justice Foundation. Brad, welcome to the Tim Donnelly Show.
Oh, it's great to be on the show, Tim. I really appreciate you and being such a spokesman for truth, and we at Pacific Justice Institute are a fan of yours, so thank you.
Well, likewise, I'm a fan of the work that you're doing, which is defending religious liberty and defending freedom from this nonstop assault to the left. I'm afraid this is going to be, you're going to be busy the next few years.
Yeah, we really are on a number of different dimensions. This decision was so broad. I thought it would be just limited to the Equal Protection Clause and just expanding the gender protection language for gender preference or something. But no, they went into the substantive due process clause of the 14th Amendment and just went into fantasy land and made it so broad that, as Chief Justice Roberts pointed out in his dissent, that they could use that same language to support polygamy and other kinds of marriages as well. And unfortunately, I hate to say this because I'm not much of a doom and gloomer. People know me that I'm not that way, but based on the language of that case, they've opened the door wide open for adult incest and polygamy. And just say,
wait a minute, I want to stop you there on polygamy, because I don't understand what the big deal. Why is it a big deal for someone to have more than one spouse now that we've, opened the barn door? I mean, what's the big deal?
Well, that's the problem, because actually there's more historically and in terms of and as far as natural function or correlated with polygamy than there would be arguably for same-sex marriage and same-sex relationships in that regard. But nonetheless, as a matter of public policy and public interest, we as Americans believe that a strong family is one with one man and one woman, and with that we have the benefits from that. But the bottom line is, you're absolutely right. That is something that based on that, this recent decision is no longer out in left field. It's front and center, and I think we're going to see it before the courts in the next few years. Well,
and look, I'm not being facetious. I'm being serious. That the once you redefine something, let's be clear. It wasn't the state. It wasn't the government that created marriage. It was God.
Right.
And we talked at the opening of the show that essentially all of our natural rights are acknowledged by the founders of this country as coming from the Creator.
Right.
And not from government. And so when the court willy-nilly literally fabricates and creates a constitutional civil right out of thin air that has really, to me, it doesn't seem that the court ever had that authority, nor was it in their purview. It's not as if they were presented with something that was it just doesn't. It went so far. Maybe I'm just struggling to understand where they ever got the authority to redefine a sacred covenant of the church.
Well, I agree with you on that, and I think what's important is what you pointed out. There's nothing in the Constitution to support what they decided, and the dissenting opinion, the four justices pointed that out clear as crystal, that this is something that they wanted to do, and it opens up the door for serious tyranny with the Supreme Court when they go down these roads that have absolutely no constitutional foundation to support. It just means whoever's in power can do what they want, and that's the real concern of the dissenting opinion. That this kind of logic it's like what they wanted the Supreme Court what they wanted the Constitution to say, but not what it actually said. It was a matter of them ruling on their will, not ruling on the Constitution.
Well, and don't, I mean, if it's not enumerated in the Constitution, then the federal government does not have authority over it specifically if that authority is taken up by the states. That's what the 10th Amendment essentially says, right?
Right.
So,
right, absolutely.
Last time I checked, it was ruling over your bedroom and your relationship was not one of the enumerated duties of the Constitution, of the federal government, as enumerated by the Constitution of the United States.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not, and so this is way beyond the constitutional powers of the federal government, or in the case of the Supreme Court, to be getting involved with. And it was a close decision. Maybe I'd like to think that as the court addresses, subsequent other things like adult incest and polygamy, maybe they'll reconsider this. But the ramifications are broader in terms of on the defensive. In terms of, for example, Alito pointed out, well, this could then arguably subject private Christian universities and colleges to losing federal aid and Pell Grant participation. They said, Attorney says, yeah, that's something that may have to deal with.
Well, the whole point of government getting involved in marriage in the first place was to control us. It was to keep you from marrying your cousin. So you had to get a marriage license. You had to pay the government to get a marriage license to keep you from marrying your cousin. Well, we have the internet now. And in most places, you're probably unlikely to marry your cousin. I can't speak for everywhere. But then they wanted to keep people of different races from getting married. So they would have prevented me from marrying my wife, which is offensive. It was government institutionalized racism. We've gotten past that. Maybe it's time that we just kick the government out of marriage, keep it in the church since it is a covenant of the church. And if a church wants to marry two people of the same sex, that's up to their church. It's up to their parishioners. It's up to them and their whole relationship with each other and with God. And it's not something that then can be used as a tool to break down the door of your church or my church to force every pastor under what is a constitutional civil rights and having the Department of Justice with armed guards with their M16s marching up to the door of the church to force a ceremony. Because I envision it. Am I crazy?
Well, at this point, what's likely going to happen with regard to pastors and clergy, and this is based on oral argument of this case, so this isn't way out, and that is that that clergy may they still may do their ceremonies, but they would no longer be able to act as an officiant of the marriage, that is, an agent of the state. Instead, if they don't do homosexual marriages, then that authority could be is subject to being taken from them, and after they do the ceremony, then the people who get married, the couple, have to go down to the county clerk's office and have it actually officiated with the county clerk. So it's sort of a two-tier clergy. Those that agree with the government get this higher privilege and recognition. Those that don't are treated and put on the back of the bus.
Wow,
that's the real concern. That is not 5 years down the road. That I think we're going to see litigated, because that was already brought up in oral argument, and the attorney on the other side agreed. It says, yes, that's something that's going to have to be dealt with.
I can't tell you how many people because we've been covering this on Facebook and Twitter, have come on either to my page or other pages and said, hey, I'm a Christian. I'm totally in favor of gay marriage. You guys are all a bunch of haters. But if somewhere down the road they try to force my pastor to marry people of the same sex, or your pastor, I'll be with you.
Well, I think we're going to see definitely, at the very least, a punishment, if you will, for pastors who have that and those want to carry out their biblical-based beliefs in that regard. I think we will see that in the future. So it's just sort of a reality, I think, with this decision, and that's why we at Pacific Justice Institute are working really hard. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to have a conference call. People can get the information on our Facebook at about 12:30 a.m. And we're going to be going through a lot of these different ramifications of this Supreme Court case and what it means in terms of future challenges to religious freedom. And that's really now the issue. It's not. It's can people who have religious beliefs not be punished because of this, the rationale of this case and what we see coming down.
Can you stay with us for another segment, Brad?
Oh, sure, I'd be happy to.
Okay, and then maybe if you can give us that number when we come back, we'll share it with our listeners. But I'd like to get a preview of what you're going to talk about tomorrow right after the break.
Sure.
323-746-TALK. That's 323-746-8255. If you have a question about religious liberty, the Supreme Court decision, we got Brad Dacus coming right back.
I'm Barack Obama, and I don't always listen to talk radio. But when I do, it's the Tim Donnelly Show.
You're listening to the Tim Donnelly Show on the Radio Free California Network. We stream live at timdonnellyshow.com. And by the way, we have a poll up there. You have to scroll down to the bottom of the page. We haven't set up its own page yet. But we're going to do this from time to time. And there's 2 poll questions about whether or not this decision is going to lead to persecution of Christian institutions like churches and schools and individuals who disagree, as well as a crazy idea. And we've got Brad Dacus of the Pacific Justice Institute on the Radio Free California Newsmaker line with us. Brad, I'd love to get your take. There's a crazy idea being floated out there that this decision, and you got into a little bit of the constitutional stuff, being a constitutional law expert, the 14th Amendment protection. What's to stop someone from provoking a case for 50-state concealed carry, where right now you have states like California who refuse to acknowledge other states' CCWs, even though they're legally and lawfully obtained. And it would seem like this creates something of a precedent that you might be able to build a case on.
As far as the Second Amendment?
Yes, the one that's actually in the Constitution, as opposed to the right to marry, which isn't ever mentioned in the Constitution.
All right, and the federal government actually streamlining the protection for people that carry arms without having it taken at an airport and stuff like that from your baggage. It is interesting how that's an interesting thought. The Supreme Court seems very selective in when they want to respect the 10th Amendment and when they don't. And when I think this decision is it's all about to quote the Justice Scalia, it's filled with flowery language as the mystical aphorisms of the fortune cookie. I mean, it's lacking even a thin veneer of law to support it, and that's what the courts can come down with. I think it's also want to point out something that Justice Thomas brought to light, which I think is very important. And Justice Thomas wrote that the opinion holds a, quote, potentially ruinous consequences for religious liberty. And he added that the scope of that liberty is directly correlated to the civil restraints placed upon religious property. So, as far as tax exempt status and religious institutions, that is right there on the chopping block in the foreseeable future because of this decision. And
Washington Post, they're very clear. A number of leftists, and even as you mentioned in the oral arguments, there was one question that got to the heart of the matter. I forget the name of the individual who was trying the case, who made the comment, but he said, absolutely, we have been looking for a vehicle to essentially undermine the religious liberty and allowing people to have tax exempt status who hold these beliefs. I mean, they're out there. This is all part of a plan orchestrated by the left. They always think 3 or 4 steps ahead. And I mean, Obama already had the rainbow ready to go. The guy can't secure the border. He hasn't made a single comment about 36 tourists who were just slaughtered in broad daylight in an event that he says never happens, which is people doing mass killings with guns in other countries. That only happens in America. But no, it only happens, or it seems to happen, when people are filled with an ideological hatred. You had Dylan Roof, who was clearly a racist and filled with hatred. But you also had this individual who one day is hanging out talking to his buddies, and the next day he kills 36 people. And of course he's Islamic. He's an Islamic jihadist. He did it, for whatever reason it is that they do that. But it's incredible that we have a president that was more than ready to celebrate this and ignores his actual presidential duties in the world to speak out on world events.
Yeah, it is interesting. I heard the White House had the rainbow colors all lit up, totally lit up with the rainbow colors. I mean, that's what I read. I didn't see much of it on the news, but at least, if not literally, then figuratively, it definitely was the case. This decision is very disturbing. Also, I think in terms of the fact that it's I think actually Justice Alito made a really great statement of dissent. He said that if a bare majority of justices can invent a new right and impose that right on the rest of the country, the only real limit on what future majorities will be able to do is their own sense of what those with political power and cultural influence are willing to tolerate. So he pointed out really clearly. He says if this is the standard basically of what is not what the Constitution says but what you want it to say, then there's very little to constrain them in the future to randomly changing it. And this is Justice Alito.
Wow.
I mean, that's why I'm making a point to quote the justices, because otherwise people say, well, Brad, you're exaggerating, you're hype. This is what the dissenting opinion
Brad
said.
Dacus, thank you for coming on with us. Hey, if you want to be on his call, Facebook, Pacific Justice Institute. He's going to have a great call tomorrow. We'll be right back. Hey, if you like shooting as much as I do, you've probably been to a lot of ranges. Unless you visited Burro Canyon Shooting Park, you've never seen anything like it. On the way there, you'll find yourself taking pictures as you traverse the majestic Azusa Canyon and wind your way up into the Angeles National Forest. With over 600 acres, including 19 private ranges, there's something for everyone. There's rifle and pistol ranges for beginners, right up to advanced shooters. And there's plenty of spaces to shoot sporting clay. You can make a family day of it, or you can bring a group for team building exercises. Bring a picnic lunch. On the weekends, they provide lunch. And don't worry, they always have ammo in case you forget yours or run out. One thing I can guarantee is that once you visited my friends at Burro Canyon Shooting Park, you'll be hooked and you'll keep coming back. BurroCanyon.com is their website, or call them at 626-910-1344, 626-910-1344. Welcome back to the Radio Free California Network. I am your host, former California State Assemblyman and Governor candidate Tim Donnelly. Our phone number, if you have not already locked it into your phone, is 323-746-TALK. That's 323-746-TALK. And by the way, I talked to our good friend Brad Dacus on the break. He has a conference call tomorrow morning. You can get the info at his webpage, which is his Facebook, which is Pacific Justice Institute. Check that out. Also, it's going to be tomorrow Tuesday at 12:30 Pacific time. If you want to write down the phone number, it's 518-530-1840. And then you need to enter access code 560-761-135. Now, if you wrote all that down super fast, then you are an amazing genius. If you didn't, then go to Brad's page, Pacific Justice Institute, because they're having a very deep and scholarly analysis. I noticed that he was quoting a number of the justices, which I have read a number of their opinions. I'm looking right now through my stack of stuff for the... Where's that one that I printed out? Of course. It's... I see it. It's over on the other desk. You know what? I need to blame that on you. You gave me way too much stuff.
Do you want me to say something sarcastic right now?
I have. Yeah, I would hope so.
I think you started preparing for today's show on Friday night.
I did.
Yeah, because I was getting emails about things all weekend.
Yeah. I gave you about 50 pages to print. But this was a very interesting comment that by Justice Alito. Today's decision will also have a fundamental effect on this court and its ability to uphold the rule of law. And mind you, the rule of law is very important to me. It's very important to anyone who cares about a constitutional republic. Because have you noticed that I've never heard the word democracy used quite so much. The new word is the American democracy. There's a reason for that. Because a democracy is just about having the majority. That's it. It's not about a constitutional republic where you are ruled by law and you have to go back to the principles of the law. That's what the Supreme Court was supposed to safeguard. But now it's just a democracy. We're just defending American democracy, meaning that you can vote whatever right you want to vote into existence out of thin air. And we've already talked about how you can't create a new right without taking some freedoms or some rights from other people. Government cannot do it. Only God can. And that's why we have so few natural rights. We have a right to life. We have a right to liberty. We have a right to pursuit of happiness and living our lives as we see fit, as long as we're not harming other individuals and we are living according to and within the law that we have all agreed to. And I continue with Justice Alito's these highbrow, very intelligent debates. Sometimes I tend to have to bring them down to earth so that I can understand them. If a bare majority of justices can invent a new right and impose that right on the rest of the country, the only real limit on what future majorities will be able to do is their own sense of what those with political power and cultural influence are willing to tolerate. That, of course, part of it was quoted by Brad Dacus before the break, but he continues, even enthusiastic supporters of same-sex marriage should worry about the scope of the power that today's majority claims. Today's decisions show that decades of attempts to restrain this court's abuse of its authority have failed. A lesson that some will take from today's decision is that the virtues of judicial self-restraint and humility cannot compete with the temptation to achieve what is viewed as a noble end by any practicable means. See, he has to go put some big words in there. All right, Justice Alito, I've got a suggestion. When you use words like practicable, that's really hard to pronounce. It means practical. And it's probably not grammatically correct to say practical means. But see, most people would understand it if you put by any means necessary, because that's how most people talk. He continues, I do not doubt that my colleagues in the majority sincerely see in the Constitution a vision of liberty that happens to coincide with their own. But this sincerity is cause for concern, not comfort. What it evidences is the deep and perhaps irremediable corruption of our own legal culture's conception of constitutional interpretation. Most Americans, understandably, will cheer or lament today's decision because of their views on the issue of same-sex marriage. But all Americans, whatever they're thinking on that issue, should worry about the majority's claim of power portends. what the majority's claim of power portends, meaning, in simple English, democracy. A simple majority can now rule over the Constitution. And that right there, that ain't right. For me to simplify it in language that everybody can understand. You know, their role, a lot of people think the role of the Supreme Court is to interpret the Constitution. It's not. The role of the Supreme Court is to evaluate law and whether or not it is constitutional and hold it up to the framework of the Constitution, not engage in serendipitous interpretation. Yes, on the one hand, they will wind up interpreting the Constitution while evaluating the constitutionality of law. That's inevitable. But it is not their role to just go out and willy-nilly interpret it. And you can't, you can be in favor of same-sex marriage. You can be in favor of same-sex civil unions and vehemently disagree with what this court did and be deeply concerned about the precedent that it sends. And look, you could be a gun hater. You could be a gun control freak. And just think, I realize that sounds crazy. And let me tell you where that craziness comes from. If I can find the, where did I put that story? Somebody should not print so much paper. It would make my job a whole lot easier. I finally found it. It was in the third stack of stuff. This is from Alan West. And look, I'm gonna preface what I'm about to read you for you to understand this is a theory. This is not a fact. This is a theory. So I will begin to read it, and then after the break, I'll come back and finish it. But this is what, according to a website, bearingarms.com, and this is referenced by Alan West, former congressman out of Florida, who was taken out of office because he is too conservative. If you're following any of the various media outlets this morning, you're probably aware that the U.S. Supreme Court has just extended gay marriage to all 50 states. The Supreme Court ruled Friday that same-sex couples have a right to marry nationwide in a historic decision that invalidates gay marriage bans in more than a dozen states. Because that's what it did. It told states, you no longer have the right to approve or disapprove of gay marriage. We have decided, we have overruled you as a state. That's the crux and the cornerstone of this issue. And gay and lesbian couples could already marry in 36 states. And the remaining 14 states, largely in the South and Midwest, will have to stop enforcing their bans on same-sex marriage. The outcome is the culmination of 2 decades of Supreme Court litigation over marriage and gay rights generally. And he goes on and talks about how well, let me read this section. The court used Section 1 of the 14th Amendment to justify its argument, which reads, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any persons within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Now, here's the kicker, as the writer articulately brings to light. By using the Constitution in such a manner, the court argues that due process clause extends to certain personal choices central to individual liberty dignity, and autonomy. And I'll get to the rest of it right after this break. 323-746-TALK if you want to weigh in.
This is international film and television star Nick Searcy, and I don't often drink talk radio, but when I do, I drink the Tim Donnelly Show. Stay thirsty, my friends.
Whether you're an experienced shooter or just buying your first gun, Turner's Outdoorsman has everything you need, along with a knowledgeable and friendly staff to help you find that perfect gear for your next adventure. Turner's now has 18 locations across Southern California, including a Victorville location right on Bear Valley Road. Be sure to check out the new Archery Pro shops in the Victorville, Chino Hills, and Pasadena locations. If you're not sure what you're looking for, you can browse and shop their selection at turners.com. Be sure to check out their weekly specials and sign up to get them delivered directly to your inbox. Turner's is where I turn for all my firearms and ammo needs. Remember to tell them Tim Donnelly sent you, and you'll get an additional discount. If you're just tuning into the Tim Donnelly Show, where have you been? What have you been doing that's more important than the scintillating conversation that we are having right here at the Radio Free California Network? If you want to join the conversation, 323-746-TALK. And not surprisingly, we're discussing the fallout from the Friday court decision. It's like you had the Obamacare decision where the court just decided they're going to nullify Congress and write their own laws. And they saved the subsidies so that the government can continue to steal from you and everybody can be happy. I love that bill that was put up to, was it Senator Ted Cruz? It was one of those guys who said, we're going to require the Supreme Court to be on Obamacare, which I thought that was fantastic. Make them eat their own cooking. But this one here, this is a theory. Now, I'm going to make it clear. I do not agree with the next portion of this when they come to a conclusion, and I'll get to it. But let me read to you. This is from bearingarms.com. It was put out by Ellen West. It's the concept that all of a sudden, magically, because of the gay marriage decision, which violated the rights of every state. So now you have the federal government coming down and saying, we know best, even though we have absolutely no authority, nothing's enumerated in the Constitution regarding marriage. We're going to use the Equal Protection 14th Clause to nullify all of the gay marriage bans, the same-sex marriage bans in the 14 states where they existed. And let me continue. The court argues that the Due Process Clause extends certain personal choices central to individual dignity and autonomy. I don't even know what that means. I don't know where that comes from in law, accepted in a majority of states across the state lines of a handful of states that still ban the practice. The vast majority of states shall issue on the matter of issuing concealed carry permits and enjoy reciprocity with a large number of other states. That's simply true. There are 36 states right now that share reciprocity with each other. By the way, surprise, surprise, California is not one of them. And what this guy's saying in his article, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's kind of clumsily worded. What he's saying is, this instantaneously confers the right for you to conceal carry and forces reciprocity in all the states that don't have it. Well, I hate to tell you that simply ain't true. So if you go out, if you come to California and you've got a concealed carry from another state, the likelihood is that it will not be recognized, and you will wind up in serious trouble, because the one thing that leftists in California take seriously is trying to take away every gun from every single law-abiding American they can, so that only criminals have guns. But what it does raise, it raises an interesting question, which is, if there were a court decision, so that means a case must be brought. That means somebody has to try this, get arrested, sue for pressing their right, or in some other way to get the court to grant a writ of certiorari. I know it's a very, very fancy Latin word that we learned in 5th grade, that they probably don't even teach in high school now, because, good Lord, we wouldn't want to, anyone to struggle and have to memorize or know some concept that is Latin in nature. But that then what you're really talking about, and you have to ask yourself this question: if you're a believer in the Second Amendment, and I believe in the Second Amendment, I believe the Second Amendment conferred the right for every citizen who is law-abiding to carry. That's my belief. So does that mean that the court is going to recognize and acknowledge and grant legitimacy to my viewpoint? I doubt it. Now, if a court case were brought, and if somebody were clever enough to reference the decision on Friday on gay marriage, where the court has unilaterally overruled all 50 states' laws, that would mean if you could figure out how to bring a case where the states no longer had any control over gun control, but only the federal government. Now, is that what you really want? I mean, the federal government at one point was pushing for an assault weapon ban. Do you want do you want to give all that power to the federal government as a constitutionalist, as someone who wants constitutionally limited government? I don't worry about the concealed carry business. I don't sit there and obsess over begging for permission to carry my gun. I know it makes it easier to go through. Don't get me started about the airport. I know it makes it easier to go through the TSA. And yes, you probably won't get a rap song written about you, if you have your concealed carry and do it all by the book. I believe that we have rights that were conferred on us by the Creator. And one of those is the right to defend your life. And that right supersedes any of these silly little laws and these restrictions on your fundamental freedoms. And only by recognizing the limitations to your natural rights are you hampered. And that's the bottom line. Now, there's a big difference between saying that the court is going to confer that. The court will never confer anything until a case is brought before it that has the right issues with the right standing. And I think it does beg a very interesting question for gun rights groups to try to push that issue so that those who are uncomfortable carrying without a concealed carry permit can carry in all 50 states. I just don't recognize that when I hit a border that I lose my Second Amendment right. Yeah, call me controversial. 323-746-TALK. We'll take your calls after the break. Hey, if you like shooting as much as I do, you've probably been to a lot of ranges. Unless you visited Burro Canyon Shooting Park, you've never seen anything like it. On the way there, you'll find yourself taking pictures as you traverse the majestic Azusa Canyon and wind your way up into the Angeles National Forest. With over 600 acres, including 19 private ranges, there's something for everyone. There's rifle and pistol ranges for beginners, right up to advanced shooters. And there's plenty of spaces to shoot sporting clay. You can make a family day of it, or you can bring a group for team building exercises. Bring a picnic lunch. On the weekends, they provide lunch. And don't worry, they always have ammo in case you forget yours or run out. One thing I can guarantee, is that once you visited my friends at Burro Canyon Shooting Park, you'll be hooked and you'll keep coming back. BurroCanyon.com is their website, or call them at 626-910-1344. 626-910-1344. Well, we are in the home stretch here at the Radio Free California Network on it is, as sweltering is the only word I can use because it's hot and windy and humid, and it's on the verge of raining, but it's just a tease. I don't know if you got any, did you get any rain over the weekend?
Oh, yeah, we had a pretty sweet desert storm. On
Desert.
Yesterday.
I'd never heard that term before. I thought that was a military operation.
No, there is such a thing as a desert storm.
Okay, well, you live in the desert and I live in the mountains.
Yes.
And I was sitting on the porch. I had been out working in the yard and trying to get some exercise so I don't actually have a heart attack. And I was cooling off, and this amazing mountain breeze blew. You know that smell you get just before it rains? It's just amazing. It's this fragrance that God just, sends you an alert.
It's like the moist sagebrush.
Yeah.
That smell.
Yeah. And in the mountains, there's a little pine mixed in with it. And but it's a beautiful aroma, but it was just a tease. I mean, we got hardly any rain, little droplets. You could hear them, pitter-patter, pitter-patter. And it barely got the pavement just a little tiny bit wet where I could take a picture of the pavement. And then the rain never followed through. Kind of like, I can't say like Obama, because he certainly has fundamentally transformed this nation. And speaking of fundamental transformations, California is working on its own. For those of you who have been following the forced vaccination debate, you might have heard on the news that it passed 24-14, the state Senate, and now is on the way to the governor. There is a petition out, and we will have a link to it up at our Facebook page and on our website to demand the governor veto it. This is an opportunity. Yeah, we're getting away from all the gay marriage and Obamacare and everything else, but it's all tied together. And this right here is really about whether the government, forget about what you think about vaccinations, because it ain't about vaccinations. 96% of the public vaccinate their children. This is about that tiny percentage who choose to either selectively not vaccinate or have personal or religious belief exemptions that are now being trampled. Once again, do you see a pattern here? We're trampling liberty. We're trampling religious liberty. We're trampling your gun rights, your gun liberty, let's call it that, or your firearms freedom. That's got a little better alliteration to it. But you want to choose your own doctor? Sorry. We are the government of no choice, not pro-choice.
Just a little note on that. So, my mom gets healthcare, with her job, and there was a paper that she filled out where it said you get to pick your doctor. So, from being a nurse, obviously, she chose the doctor that she likes and agrees with the views of, and blah blah blah. Well, the insurance wrote back and said, pick a different doctor. She can't have that doctor.
But see, that's what's happened to our freedom.
Yeah.
We have surrendered our rights, and we have surrendered our freedom, all for what? So that we can have our health care subsidized, so we can wind up subsidizing people who refuse to work for a living and are not productive, contributing members of society? Screw that. One of the reasons I didn't go to the doctor, by the way, I had 1 million people on my Facebook page commenting, and I appreciate all the concern for my health. I'm fine, by the way, but I guess I should have done that in the opening segment. That's how backwards I am. But I didn't go to the doctor. Part of me wanted to. I was a little nervous about my pounding hard, and I got a little dizzy when I stood up, and it was starting to be hard to breathe, and I couldn't figure out if it was the smoke or the humidity or the over caffeination or whatever it was. I was Googling heart attack symptoms and diagnosing myself because I didn't want to go to the doctor. I didn't want to go to the emergency room. Look, you go to the emergency room, what's that going to cost you? $1,500? For what? To sit in a room where you're going to have to wait in line, even though you're feeling this real urgency, it probably isn't as real as you think it is. And then you're going to have to pay a fortune for a handful of tests that you could do at a physical you might get for like $75.
Oh, no. Worse than that. So a friend of ours that we know, but I won't name any names, her husband got burned by a fire. They were burning weeds in the backyard. The fire got him, so she took him to the emergency room instead of calling 911 because of the ambulance fees. They made him sit in the waiting room, burned face, burned skin for like 2 hours.
Oh, my word.
Yeah. That's terrible.
That's
how bad the system's gotten.
Now, did that fire drive the snake onto your property?
No.
By the way, we never did finish that discussion about the snake. You and your family are not just random snake killers. Because it was funny. We went and talked to another friend of ours on the way out of the studio who said that he had at a job that he was working on, a construction job, a huge snake that actually ate a rattler. And he had a picture of it. It was pretty cool. And no, you and your father were acting in self-defense over a snake that would not leave your property, whose ferocity and danger was largely unknown.
Well, we think it was trying to get to the pool for water. But, I mean, we gave it a couple chances. My dad took him with the tractor, put him over the fence, thinking that the fence would keep him out.
So he didn't instinctively just murder the snake?
No.
Okay.
He came back, and then he went down a hole.
How many times did he let it cross the border?
Twice.
So your dad is more liberal than
with the snakes. He was being a little nicer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, see, because I wouldn't. Look, you cross the border once, that's it. You're done. If you come here illegally, I wouldn't tolerate it. I would ship your ass back. And can I say that?
Yes.
and then that's it. You want to come to this country, come legally. But we were, of course, talking about snakes. At any rate, and I have been out weed whacking to do my voluntary fire compliance, which I agree with, by the way. If you haven't done yours, you really need to. It's important because somebody can throw a cigarette out of their car and spark a wildfire. In these conditions, it could be very severe in the desert, in the mountains, in the foothills, anywhere that you can hear me in the sound of my voice. It's really important you do that. If you don't do it and you have a very alert fire department, they will actually fine you. They'll send out a crew and they'll way overcharge you to clean it up. And I got to admit, I got home on Friday night. Craziest thing happened. You know that I had a couple of jackets stolen from my car. Two of my favorite jackets. The one I was posing with Vince Vaughn in, and then my iconic. Why are you laughing?
Because you actually said that you were posing with Vince Vaughn.
Well, we were standing next to each other posing for a picture.
Yeah.
What's funny about that?
Well, because you then turned it into who was best dressed.
Well, somebody else did that, but I did post it up.
Okay.
And I won that. I have a picture of that and a Facebook post to prove it. But we love Vince Vaughn here, by the way. Just saying. I mean, the guy is one of the few outspoken patriots in defense of our Second Amendment. Look, you got me way off track here. So one thing I'm very sensitive about now that somebody broke into my truck on my own property is seeing people on my property. It's one of those fundamental rights, property rights. And I see this teenager dressed in a hoodie, hanging out on the perimeter of my property, like messing around right next to my fence. And I'm thinking, what is this? What is going on? I'm about to go in. I'm actually carrying a suit coat. I brought a suit coat to work because Fox 11 News wanted to interview me last Friday on the gay marriage decision. They ultimately bailed, but I had to be prepared. I was going to have to wear a suit coat in the studio. But I'm walking across my property looking, and I caught this. You won't believe what I caught this kid doing.
What was he doing?
I was waiting for you to ask. He was cleaning up my property.
What?
The space between my fence and the street, my fence and the road, which, first of all, we're supposed to weed whack it. That's one of the areas they lay out. And secondly, people just throw trash. I have a little over an acre and a lot of fence line, 350 feet on one fence and a bunch on the other. And it's a job to clean it up. And I've been out there doing it little by little, and I was hoping my kids would get off the couch and get the weed whacker out there and do it. And here's this teenager cleaning up my property. He's got a plastic bag. He's picking up all the bottles and cans and wrappers and McDonald's containers and all kinds of garbage that people have just thrown willy-nilly out of their cars. And he did an excellent job. And I walked over and talked to him. Turned out he was the son of my neighbor, who's a firefighter. Kid's super tall, young, super polite young man. Thanked me for coming over. He told me he was worried about what people would think with him there on the side of the road. And, when I was younger, I probably would have reacted differently or yelled at him or ran over at him and scared the daylights out of him. But, something happens when you reach a certain age. And I was just really pleasantly surprised and I asked him, I said, okay, so why are you cleaning up my property? Or why are you doing this? And he said, I'm doing this to honor my father. He said, my father raised me a certain way, and he asked me to do this, and I want to do it in a way that honors my father for all that he's done for me. And I was like, wow. We got a lot of people hating on religious people. A lot of people hating on, right now on Facebook and Twitter over the gay marriage decision from Friday. But this young man and this family are very devout Christians who raised their children. They homeschooled their kids. And, finding that kid in a hoodie, talking to me that way, compared to the thugs that we've seen in the streets, cussing at people, cursing police officers, spitting in the face of a priest there in New York City in a gay pride parade and all this other stuff. To have somebody speak that respectfully to an adult while he is out there cleaning up my property, I am still absolutely astounded and blown away. And
I definitely think that's one thing that our country has lost somewhere along the lines, is it doesn't matter what your views are, what your religious preferences are, etc. It's respect.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's a great segue to go to break. 323-746-TALK is our number. Your last chance to weigh in, because if you don't, we'll just keep talking without you. Be right back after these messages. Hey, if you find yourself in my hometown of Twin Peaks, don't leave without stopping by the Grill at the Antlers Inn. It's right in the heart of Twin Peaks. They serve dinner every night. They're right there at Highway 189 and Bear Springs Road. They have the best steaks, the best sushi. No matter what you have, make sure you call ahead for a reservation. 909-336-2600. 909-336-2600. And tell them Tim Donnelly sent you.
Pour me something tall and strong. Make it a hurricane before I go insane. It's only 12:30, but I don't care. It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
You had to know it's 5 o'clock somewhere. You know, there was a story I was going to get to earlier in the show. There's a Pennsylvania newspaper. The editor has been a lot more straightforward and a lot more honest than most leftists. And by the way, most newspaper article editors and most editors of television shows in the mainstream are leftists. Most, not all. He said, he wrote this, as a result of Friday's ruling, the Penn Live / the Patriot News will no longer accept, nor will it print op-eds and letters to the editor in opposition to same-sex marriage. Just flat out censorship. Your view is no longer correct, so shut up and go away. That really, I appreciated his honesty. And then later in the day, people were criticizing him, so he doubled down. This is not hard. We would not print racist, sexist, or anti-Semitic letters. To that, we add homophobic ones. Now, check this out. You can't. He references anti-Semitic, but he doesn't say that they won't print anti-Christian ones. Not that they should. I'm just saying it's just interesting, the double standard. Then he gets criticized even more. He's feeling the heat, so he says, clarification, we will not foreclose discussion of the High Court's decision. Meaning, in English, for those of you who are thinking about actually voting for Jeb Bush and or Hillary Clinton, who are basically of the same party, we have been pressured by those who are still reading our newspaper to tolerate a little bit of discussion about the High Court's decision. But arguments that gay marriage is wrong or unnatural will not be tolerated. So they will allow you to opine as long as your opinion isn't too offensive. What does that sound like? That's just censorship. That's the left for you. And believe me, this is just the beginning. And the whole gay marriage issue is only one little tiny battleground, and it has very little to do with equal rights and equal civil rights for all people under the law, because the 99% of Americans support that.
Speaking of percentages, can I read one more line off of our Twitter feed?
Please do.
This is awesome. I love it. Okay, it says 90% of y'all Christians don't even go to church, but y'all want to sit up here and judge others. F out of here. Well, then it says, no idea what 90% means, but this is Common Core math?
Well, I guess you can hate in any language, and no one said you had to be smart to get a Twitter account. So, look, we will continue this discussion, and we will bring you the angles you never thought about, because that's our job, and we will wade into the sewage and the filth to pull out the quotes that are worthy to be heard right here at the Tim Donnelly Show. We do that so you don't have to, but I don't do it alone. So I want to thank my wife for letting me, Bethany Nosko the Noskinator for being an awesome producer, Cassie Cassidy, our intrepid guest booker, and Sean McNeil, who is the technological wizard that helps us bring you this show every day and make certain that you can hear the stream. So thanks to Sean and thanks to you. Because without you, we don't have a show. So God bless you and Godspeed. Tim Donnelly Show, out.